taken down. But many say there's an irony in Austria's stance. While cracking down on illegal migration, it quietly relies on controlled immigration to address labor shortages. With an aging population, Austria expanded its skilled worker visas and looked for foreign care workers. Yet, this side of immigration rarely sparks conversation. Instead, debates focus almost exclusively on asylum and illegal arrivals, creating a paradox. Austria enforces strict borders while inviting others in for economic needs. And to better understand all of this, it's worth looking at the key players involved here. Influential people who have swayed the national conversation have been the driving force behind Austria's move towards strict immigration laws. The former Chancellor, Sebastian Kurz, was crucial. He called for the closure of the Balkan route while serving as foreign minister in 2015. By 2017, he had relaunched his center-right party with a tough stance on border control and changed its color to turquoise, showing that hardline policies could win elections. However, many criticized him for transforming the People's Party into a strong anti-immigrant force, reshaping it in his own image. Herbert Kickl, leader of the far-right FPO, has been even more tough. As Interior Minister in 2018, he proposed concentrating asylum seekers in central locations and pushed for aggressive policies like raids on refugee shelters and seizing migrants' phones, as well as demanding up to €840, $1,040 in cash. Kickl also floated ideas such as processing asylum seekers on ships offshore or housing them in basic departure centers to discourage settlement. Now, as FPO leader, he champions Austria for Austrians, something that has been chanted since the days of Eins Christian Strache. Chancellor Karl Nehammer, OVP, speaks of migration in crisis terms, urging Austria to pull the brake and focus on stopping inflows, regardless of border infrastructure. Interior Minister Gerhard Karner has ramped up deportations and criticized other EU countries' asylum procedures, claiming Austria's restrictive policies are working, with arrivals falling significantly. Even the Greens, once more sympathetic to refugees, have had to accept stricter policies to keep the coalition together, silencing many of the last that are still pro-immigration. The opposition is also shifting. A recent Social Democratic regional leader suggested maybe the asylum cap should be zero for a few years, drawing public support, though the party's national leader dismissed the idea as moronic. President Alexander Van der Bellen, a Green, occasionally reminds the nation of its humanitarian duties, but holds little influence over policy. Overall, Austria's political landscape now centers around one main message: drastically limiting immigration. Calls for compassion or EU solidarity are being overshadowed by the slogan, Austria First. But despite how it may look on the surface, at its core, Austria's tough immigration policies have deeply divided public opinion. Protests frequently come up. Refugee advocates and church groups call for humane treatment, while right-wing demonstrators protest asylum abuse. NGOs like Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch condemn Austria's measures as drastic and unjust, warning they undermine refugee protections. Judith Sunderland, acting Deputy Europe and Central Asia Director at Human Rights Watch, said, "These measures constitute a legal wall to asylum just as despicable as a razor wire fence." The UN and many EU officials voiced concern over Austria's 2016 emergency asylum law, but Austrian authorities continue to defend their stance as addressing legitimate fears, citing other countries' failures and border pressures. Internationally, Austria's policies have drawn criticism from allies. Luxembourg's Prime Minister Xavier Bettel opposed EU-funded fences, emphasizing Europe's legacy of tearing down walls, saying Europe's heritage was overcoming divisions after the Second World War. Germany, which at first adopted a different course, has recently tightened its borders in response to Austria's more stringent position. Under Giorgia Meloni, Italy, which was at odds over border walls during the 2015-16 crisis, is now taking a tough stance. In an effort to reduce migration, the European Commission has recently turned to more drastic measures, such as fast-track border camps and agreements with nations like Tunisia, although it has long sought similar asylum rules. However, not everyone in Austria is in favor of this change, which is equally crucial to remember. Shame is voiced by liberal groups, students, and urban residents, who often oppose tent camps in the Rwanda model, seeing them as immoral. Green MPs and the Catholic Church caution that Austria's international standing is under jeopardy. Proposals that are controversial such as requiring asylum seekers to perform public work in order to repay Austria, have provoked criticism and accusations of public shaming. So while the hardline approach certainly dominates, a quiet debate about Austria's choices continues beneath the surface. While some of the backlash may be warranted, Austria is not the first country to enact these kinds of measures, whether they are seen as drastic or not. And either way, they are proud of their results so far. Austria is effectively bucking the global illegal migration trend. Austria received 1,835 asylum applications in June 2024, a 64% drop from 2023. Additionally, a clear statement was made public. The half-year results show that the measures are working and that smugglers are avoiding Austria. So while other countries can cast judgments, not all are without their own backlashes. But of course, others are trying different measures. But the question ultimately is Austria a trailblazer? Or is it a near-perfect melding of other countries' policies and measures? Well, first off, let's look at Hungary. Hungary essentially sealed its borders and completely stopped accepting new asylum applications in 2015 when it put up a steel fence and announced zero tolerance for asylum seekers. The €120 million, 4-meter-high fence along the 110-mile border with Serbia and Croatia was built to stop migrants on the Balkan land route. Although Austria openly denounced Hungary at the time, its current stance resembles Budapest's. And in 2023, it even joined Hungary in opposing EU migrant quotas. In contrast, Germany and Switzerland maintain more realistic approaches. Germany took in over 1 million first-time asylum applications in 2015, and by 2020, over half of these refugees had found jobs. Today, Germany continues accepting thousands annually, though it has recently reintroduced border checks with Austria. Switzerland, with a smaller scale, enforces strict deportations and has policies like automatic expulsion of criminals, but processes far fewer asylum claims. Italy and France sit somewhere in between. Italy, on the front line of Mediterranean migration, has cracked down on NGO rescue ships and limited migrant transfers within the EU. Austria sympathizes, but has also shut its doors during surges, shown by the Brenner fence threat in 2016 and the threat of sending troops to the border to stop migrants entering in 2017, which saw Rome outraged. How about France? Well, France swings between openness and restriction, and hasn't adopted Austria's zero asylum approach just yet. Overall, Austria is at the forefront of Europe's enforcement wave, pointing to peers like Denmark, which floated its own Rwanda plan, and noted that others are following suit. Austria insists it's just being bold, but critics argue it's rewriting Europe's migration map. When all is said and done, Austria's war on immigration didn't happen overnight. Once a refuge for Bosnians and Hungarians, it has shifted gears to become one of Europe's strictest gatekeepers, building barriers, tightening laws, and challenging EU norms. Supporters see it as protecting national interests. Critics see it as abandoning core values. The real question? As Austria and its neighbors tighten borders, what happens to those fleeing war and persecution? Will Europe close itself off entirely, or can it find a balance? Austria's bold shift not only offers a warning, but a glimpse into a future where the continent redefines its approach to asylum. But one thing is clear. Since 2015, Austria's immigration policy has undergone significant changes. And from that, the world is watching as a new era of enforcement unfolds, truly marking the end of the welcoming chapter. As of right now, it's unclear if this will fix Austria's problems or bring up new ones. But its experiment is without a doubt changing Europe, and nobody can afford to ignore it. What about how Greece is devastated by its immigration crisis?